Ninjago has very few Spinjitzu masters. It is a fairly rare technique that is only taught to the best in the lands, and I do think it's a fairly cool thing that the technique is actually quite restricted, and we do actually know why. The writers have confirmed that they don't want just anyone knowing Spinjitzu because it wouldn't make the ninja feel unique. So it is very clear that knowing Spinjitzu is something special when you do consider it in the larger context of Ninjago. So of that very select list, it is very curious to know that there are a few people that very rarely actually utilize Spinjitzu. One of the biggest examples of that is most definitely Masako. She used it once in season 2 of Ninjago and has never used it again, and we just don't really know the explanation as to why. But the thing is that while she doesn't really use Spinjitzu, it's fair enough. She's not really a fighter. But one of the more interesting case uses of a lack of Spinjitzu is most definitely going to be Garmadon. The first Spinjitzu master's son himself, he just doesn't really actually utilize Spinjitzu. He does of course use it every once in a while, but it's genuinely extremely rare, which I do think is a fairly curious thing to note. But the question is, why doesn't he use it during certain eras of his life? That is honestly something that has bothered me for a long time, and I wanted to make a video talking about it today. So what I'm going to do is go through each and every single variant of Garmadon, or more specifically each and every era of Garmadon, and try to figure out why he does or doesn't use Spinjitzu respectively. So sit back, relax, and let me theorize as to why he doesn't use it. I'm going to immediately get one thing out of the way. The reason for the most part why Garmadon doesn't really use Spinjitzu, and also why Wu doesn't often use Spinjitzu, is just quite simply because they would be way too overpowered. That is the out-of-universe reason by all accounts. So getting that out of the way feels most fitting. But let's actually now talk about the eras where he does use Spinjitzu. In his child era, the few times we've seen that, we have definitely seen him utilize it a couple of times. This is probably because the technique was relatively new to them, so they were probably just utilizing it more. I can't remember whether or not he was evil by the point in time we've seen him use Spinjitzu when he was a child, but that might just be me. The main thing I'm thinking about is when he used it in season 11 flashbacks. But anyway, going into his more teen/young adult years, we do see him utilize Spinjitzu a few times. We actually see him use it against Klaus, we see him just use it generally speaking within the Serpentine War, and we also get to see him use it against Samukai when he takes over the underworld. So when he's younger, he was definitely a lot more open to the concept of utilizing Spinjitzu, and I do think the reason as to why he does this is just simply down to the fact that when Garmadon was becoming evil, and when he was slowly but surely being corrupted to the dark side, he was just simply using anything that would give him an edge. That is quite literally what is stated when he is fighting Klaus in season 4. When Klaus actually complained about the fact that Spinjitzu was used and that it was forbidden, it is very clearly obvious that Garmadon was told to not use it at some point, but he still chose to because it would give him an edge. That is, by all accounts, just him just having the most powerful maneuver whenever he simply needed it to be the case. Of course, he gets praised for this after the fact, which probably reinforces belief, but it definitely does show that Garmadon was utilizing it to have the advantage over the people around him. But once he did actually transition into his era of being the Dark Lord, the king of the underworld, it definitely did feel like there was some form of a shift. In his initial form, or the pilots more specifically, he doesn't ever use Spinjitzu, but that is mostly down to the fact that he just doesn't actually fight anyone during that time. He doesn't actually get into any sort of conflict, he just allows Samukai to do it, and then when he destroys himself, he just moves on and leaves. So I don't think there's much to really determine from that. But moving into the season 1, season 2 era of the show, you can see why he wasn't really utilizing Spinjitzu. He does use it when him and Wu are trying to escape the realm of madness. But one thing you'll note is that when Wu says just like old times, that is when Garmadon decides to use Spinjitzu. He acknowledges the fact that that was Wu's intention by all accounts, and that's the only time we actually see him do that. Beyond that point, he was basically just biding his time for the golden weapons, and once he did get his hands on them, there was no reason to use Spinjitzu. He had the golden weapons or the mega weapon to do his own bidding, so it's not exactly like he needed it after that point. But even after he lost the mega weapon, he then had his hands on the stone army, again just having no ambition to fight whatsoever. The only time he came close to fighting Lloyd was basically around the point in time where the metamorphosis actually took place. So Garmadon was just in this cycle of basically not necessarily needing to do Spinjitzu whilst in the classic era of his Dark Lordship. But after he does become good, and after the events of Season 2, we do see him actually again continue to not utilize Spinjitzu. In the 2 seasons where he was actually Master Garmadon, he never uses it once. The closest we got to it was when he did it in the intro of Season 4. And I do find it fairly interesting to note that his Spinjitzu in that seems to be grey, similar to Masako's, and not purple. It's not like it's linked to the fact that he was evil by any account, it's just the color of darkness. But anyways, I will note this, I do think that both seasons have different reasons as to why he doesn't utilize Spinjitzu. In Season 3, we don't see him use it because he has a vow of peace, he doesn't want to fight, and eventually when he does actually succumb to fighting, you will note that in the very few times that he has done it, it's been against opponents he wouldn't necessarily want to do Spinjitzu on. The main character that he does fight in Season 3 is actually Wu, and I doubt he would want to use a technique like Spinjitzu on Wu because it is just simply too powerful and he doesn't want to hurt his own brother. Beyond that point, he doesn't actually really fight anyone in that season, so it makes sense why we don't actually see it within Season 3 itself. But come into Season 4, and it's definitely the most curious point in time when it does come to Garmadon and his lack of Spinjitzu. The thing for me is that you would think that he would use it in certain instances, more specifically his fight with Klaus. When I think of how Garmadon just simply didn't utilize any sort of technique against him, I do find it fairly interesting. Of course, beyond that point, he very rarely does get into fights, he mainly just tries to stop people. He tried to stop Klaus a few times, which I think he would deem Spinjitzu too powerful in that moment to do so, and once he's a serpent, who knows if he's even able to do Spinjitzu by that point. And also, he has the benefits of being an Anachondri even though he doesn't want to be. So again, I do find it to be an instance where he would just simply choose not to in those moments. But again, that fight with Klaus is definitely curious to me. But I do think I do have an answer for why he isn't using Spinjitzu against Klaus. Throughout the entirety of that fight, Klaus is utilizing anything that he can against Garmadon, but Garmadon is just simply trying to get away from it. Of course he does throw some punches and some kicks, but that is essentially it. But I do think it's actually a bit of a subtle callback to when Garmadon was actually evil. The last time we got to see him actually take on Klaus, he utilizes Spinjitzu to win and to overpower Klaus's dark magic. Again, of course, going back to this idea that it's forbidden and is too powerful, and Garmadon did what he had to survive and win, and evil Garmadon absolutely loved that, but I think good Garmadon would remember that and would realize that it wasn't the path forward. Utilizing a martial art to get the advantage in any sort of situation, I think is something that good Garmadon would fundamentally disagree with. So I think the reason why we don't see Garmadon use it there is because he's trying to actually do better. He's not trying to default to a way that he did when he was evil. He's actually trying to have an improvement because that is one of the main things he was trying to do whilst he was good. I think by all accounts Garmadon was actively choosing not to use Spinjitzu as a way of redemption to himself. Which honestly I think is a very fitting way to look at Garmadon during that era. He just wanted to make things right, he wanted to do correct by his family, his son and the ninja. He wanted to actually atone for his mistakes. It is one of the biggest aspects of Garmadon at that point in time. So I do think Spinjitzu is an aspect of him that he does want to maybe not utilize as much as he used to when he was evil, because that was mainly when he was using it, when he was evil, to get the advantage in any sort of instance. Because it isn't just Klaus that he used Spinjitzu to get an advantage of. The other person he did it to was actually Samukai. So I do think Garmadon is almost associating his use of Spinjitzu when he was evil. And honestly, looking at it now with the context of why he doesn't use it when he's good, it really does fit, and I honestly really like the idea of it. But beyond good Garmadon, we still get instances of Garmadon where he doesn't utilize Spinjitzu. When he is resurrected in his evil form, he is not utilizing Spinjitzu during the Oni trilogy, apart from one time when he uses it in endings for the Tornado of Creation. Now in that moment, of course he is utilizing it, although reluctantly because you hear him groan. He is using it because he needs to be a part of the Tornado of Creation. He's using it to be a part of things so he can help the ninjas stop the Oni. It is a necessity by that point, and that is why he did it. But beyond that, and in the Oni trilogy itself, the reason he's not doing it is because essentially he has got his own true potential now. He's got his own power, and he's got something that is just definitively stronger than Spinjitzu itself. So he probably just didn't see it by any account as being something that is useful. And I also think he was trying to separate again further from who he used to actually be. And then by extension, this then also does apply to him during Crystallized. During Crystallized, again, there is not one moment of Spinjitzu actually being utilized. And that is again because of his actual powers themselves, and especially the evolution of them. The utilization of Oni form is clearly extremely strong, as it's a very powerful ability that is on the level of Dragon form, another extremely powerful ability. Something that Garmadon can easily tap into, and is something of that magnitude, I think is honestly a no-brainer. Again, striking the reason as to why Garmadon isn't utilizing it. Again, he has a better weapon in his utility box, and why wouldn't he use it by that point in time? Again, you could argue that he's maybe just trying to separate himself further, but I don't think that is what he's doing by now. I just quite simply think it's not an idea in his head, because there's just not really a reason to actually utilize it. But with that final era now checked off, we are now left, in my opinion, with a fairly interesting timeline as to why Garmadon does or doesn't use Spinjitzu. Like I said, and to summarize it, in his younger years, he utilized it because it's a new technique that he has mastered, going into his teen and his young adult era, and the beginning of him being evil. He utilized it as a way of obtaining power. He used it as a way to master the people in front of him. He used it as a form of evil. He uses it basically to get his own way, which I do think is fairly fitting. And then, like I said, we go into an era where he has more powerful weapons like the golden weapons. But then after all of that is an era of redemption. I like the idea that it's something that Garmadon would choose not to use because of how he's used it in the past. But then finally, we've got the Oni era, where it's just simply something more powerful than Spinjitzu itself. Honestly, I think this is a tidy timeline, and I would love to know what you guys think of it. Because I do think on an overall, Garmadon's utilization of Spinjitzu is very unique, and I would love to honestly see him use it more. But I just don't think it's something that they are overly enthusiastic about because of all of the other abilities that he does have. Again, the out-of-universe explanation, he would be way too powerful with Spinjitzu as well. But I would love to know what you guys think. Do you want Garmadon to use Spinjitzu more? Do you want Garmadon to use it less? Do you like my explanation as to why he doesn't use it when he's actually good? I would love to know what you think, because I do think it's a decent explanation, but of course, I would love to know what your opinion is on it as well. But thank you very much for watching the video, and I do hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. I love discussing Ninjago with more people. And if you do want to support the channel any further, which you do not have to, you could always become a channel member and join the legends that you see on screen. Each of you, your support means the absolute world to me, and I truly cannot thank you enough. But like I said, that's about it for today, and take care. Okay,